let's not belabor the point here. These two vehicles, they might have off-road-esque looks and off-road-esque package names like Wilderness and XRT, but they aren't real off-roaders, not like this guy. We've come to an off-road park where we're going to spend the day climbing some hills, going over some trails, and finding the limits of these so-called soft-roaders to figure out what they can't quite do as well as the Bronco, but also potentially some things that they might do better. That should provide a stern test for these two SUVs, something that we like here at Edmunds because we test everything. Check out the noses of these vehicles. See how different they are, especially the Bronco, where its bumper kind of folds back and under to give it really great clearance up front, while these two, their noses stick out like they've been telling lies all week. Let's go see what this means. Here's where you might have expected to see our Zigger-Rock of integrity, but our usual OHV park that we use for stuff like this, well, it may have caught on fire recently, so instead, we found this rock. The Bronco climbed up it with no problem. We had a spotter out here, but it was kind of just for giggles. This thing went all the way to the top, and that back tire is just barely off the ground. So now we'll see how the soft-roaders do. All right, now it's time to try to load in the Santa Fe. Now this thing does have 1.3 inches more ground clearance than the regular Santa Fe, thanks to that suspension lift and the bigger tire. But I have a feeling we won't be able to get very far with this because that nose sticks out a ton. And as we saw earlier, the approach angle is really poor. And he's telling me that we're not close. We finally just came up to the rock and there's absolutely no chance to get up here, but let's hop out and take a look for a second because there's a few things that we do want to show. Well, just like we thought, the Santa Fe, it didn't get so far. Got up to the rock here and we could immediately see that there's no way that we could even get the tire even close to it. The nose of it is already basically edged up against the rock right here. 8.3 inches of ground clearance is not the worst number. The Toyota Land Cruiser that we actually had only had 8 inches of ground clearance, but because it had better approach, departure, and breakover angles, that vehicle was able to complete much more difficult obstacles than just this rock. So for the Santa Fe, it was a fail. Let's see how the Subaru does. Nope. Well, it turned out to be a pretty quick trip in the Subaru as well. This thing has an extra inch of ground clearance over the Santa Fe, but the approach angle also sucks. So if we come around to the front here, you can see absolutely no chance of making it up on the rock. The tire is about 1.5 feet away, just like it was in the Santa Fe. Both of these vehicles, they have very, what I'll call pointy noses. They got a lot of stuff out in front of the front tire here that you can see, a lot of cladding, things that you don't necessarily want to hit or damage. If you wanted to take the Santa Fe or the Crosstrek really off-road, you'd probably have to take off the bumper and things like that, but that's not really something that you want to do with either of these vehicles. So both the Subaru and the Santa Fe can't really Bronco on this obstacle. We did have to find a little incline that both of these could make it up because we wanted to take a quick look underneath, and when we did, we found one key difference because while both of them have skid plates, only the one here under the Santa Fe is metal, the Subaru's is plastic, and it's really not going to protect you from anything. Both of these also don't have the same kind of built-up frame you'll find under the Bronco, so you're going to have to be very careful when you're off-roading to not drag them on anything because you could damage what's underneath very easily. For our next test, we've got a hill climb, and first we're gonna send up the Bronco. Now the Bronco has a lot of equipment that you'd really want for something like this. It's got a low range, it's got 4-wheel drive instead of all-wheel drive, it's got some real knobby tires, it's got locking front, rear, and center discs, and those are all things that the Subaru and the Hyundai do not have. So the Bronco should make it up this hill, no problem. In fact, I don't even need to turn around to see if it did, and now it's time to see what those other two can do. Okay, so first we're gonna try to tackle this in the Hyundai. And like I said before, it doesn't have a lot of that great equipment that the Bronco had. All it basically has is all-wheel drive, and the only button I really need to press is this 4-wheel drive lock, which sort of locks power being sent to both axles. I may have to turn off the traction control, but I'm gonna try it in this mode first to see how it does. Hyundai says that in this drive mode, it does allow for a little more slip, which is kind of what you need to get up a hill like this, but there is no off-road drive mode dedicated in the XRT. Now this hill climb isn't particularly steep, but it's got some real deep ruts to it, so there are definitely going to be points where I only have 2 or 3 wheels on the ground. Already I can feel the wheels really slipping. And here I'm pretty deep into the throttle, try to get it over this first little hump. Yeah, and we're just kind of stuck here, so I'm gonna stop for a second, turn off the traction control, and then now we're gonna see how it does. Oh yeah, that's much better. And this system is working much better with the traction control off than it was in just the four-wheel drive lock mode. Turns out that the Santa Fe can conquer the hill climb. You just got to get it set up right. All right, now we're in the Subaru. Pretty simple to set this thing up too. It does have off-road driving mode, so we're gonna put the X mode into snow/dirt because the hill has some loose gravel and stuff on it. And then one other setting, I'm gonna put the climate control all the way down to low because it's not quite 98 degrees and rising out here today, but it's close. One thing to know about both of these vehicles, they don't really have great suspension flexibility. So on something like this, we're definitely going to end up at times with tires in the air. And that's why it's such a great test for these traction control systems. Man, this thing is noisy. It's noisy going up, but it seems to be grabbing a little bit better than the Hyundai was. The traction control light is just going crazy here. I am bouncing it back and forth. It's a bit hard to get even power output. We don't want to go too fast up the hill because we don't just want to rely on the momentum. So the Crosstrek made much lighter work of that hill. I think it's mostly down to the fact that the traction control seems to be a lot more effective in this vehicle, as you might expect. Subaru's traction control, really, really good, some of the best in the business. I will say that it was disconcertingly loud mechanical noises as we were going up, but that's what you're gonna kind of expect as it's trying to find the grip from each of those individual tires. But all things being considered, pretty easy in the Crosstrek. Now it is time to pick up the pace a little bit, and we don't have a sandy wash like we normally do, but we have this sort of little off-road track here, but it does have a lot of rocks and ruts in it. However, in the Bronco, you are not particularly worried about that because it has got tons of suspension travel and these big, real beefy tires. So if you happen to run into a rock or go over one or hit a rut like that, you're not really all that worried, and you just get to keep on having a good time. Now it's time to take on our course in the Santa Fe. So while the Santa Fe was redesigned for this year and got this brand new styling and this very cool new interior that we're going to talk about more later, didn't really change the powertrains at all. So two powertrain options, a 2.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder like what we have here, and also a hybrid option that you can't get with the XRT. So if you want the off-road trim, you're going to have to go with the turbocharged 4. And out here on the trail with this higher speed stuff, this powertrain, I'm actually quite happy with it. I have it in sport mode right now because I want that responsiveness. And again, no real off-road modes to speak of, so just sport mode to give me better throttle response. Four-wheel drive is locked and the traction control's off, so I can get a little slidey stuff going here. I cannot hit this trail with the same impunity that I did in the Bronco. The Bronco, you're just, you know, hammer down, rocks, bumps, just kind of power through everything. Here we have to be a bit more careful because, again, the lack of travel, and it's pretty bumpy. But I will say the powertrain, the output is like instantaneous. It really loves to toss torque out at low RPMs. 8-speed automatic transmission. Haven't had to touch the shifters yet because it's been in the right gear pretty much the whole time. Now when it comes to towing, actually, the XRT has a leg up on the other two. It has a maximum towing capacity of 4,500 pounds, which is higher than the other Santa Fe's as well because you get an upgraded transmission cooler and a few other things. And both the Crosstrek and the Bronco, their towing capacity tops out at 3,500 pounds. And given how strong this engine feels in this little off-road section that we have right here, I think it'll actually tow decently well. Man, I wish they made this thing with just a little more lift and a little more tire. This would be really fun. Let's see how the Subaru does. Okay, now we've moved into the Crosstrek Wilderness, and the Crosstrek Wilderness also has a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder engine, but it's not turbocharged, and it's also a boxer engine, as it is a Subaru. So you're gonna get a lot less output here, about 100 less horsepower than you're gonna get in the Santa Fe, and a lot less torque as well. It also comes with a CVT, and usually CVT might as well be a 4-letter word because usually it just puts a real damper on the experience. But Subaru has put in paddle shifters, so you are shifting through gears, and so we're gonna see how this thing feels out here. So when you are using X mode for some of the different surfaces, you actually can't activate the engine's more aggressive throttle mapping. So I've actually shifted X mode back into normal, and I'll put the engine into its more aggressive throttle mapping to try to get, you know, a bit more kick out of this thing. And what's interesting about the Crosstrek Wilderness is that even though it has the same engine as some of the regular Crosstreks, they actually changed the final drive ratio to make it feel more responsive. And it has definitely worked. Now, you're not getting the same kick that you're getting out of that turbo engine in the Santa Fe. Even though the Santa Fe is much larger, I still think that thing has a bit more to it. I will say this, I've been pretty happy with the throttle response in the Crosstrek as well. Not something that I really expected with the CVT. Also, these paddle shifters, they're kind of fun. This thing will actually hold RPMs for you. So I'm gonna click it down to first here, and yeah, it lets me hold it almost all the way to red line, now up into second. Whew. Pretty good little engine, I would say. And the CVT is not the wet blanket that you think it might be. Now, same thing as with the Hyundai, you're gonna be a little bit careful here because you don't have a ton of suspension travel. And again, as we saw earlier, the nose sticks very far out, so you're a bit worried about your clearances in these ruts and things like that. So again, you can't take this road full bore. I would also say that the shorter wheelbase here in the Crosstrek, it means that I'm bouncing around a lot more. I'm getting jostled a lot on a lot of these bumps, more than I was in the Santa Fe. The Santa Fe probably will be the smoother rider when it comes to an off-road trail than you're gonna get here in the Subaru, but I'm surprised at how punchy this engine feels. And on a trail like this, it does quite well for itself. Now, when it comes to on-road driving, the Santa Fe is the more comfortable of the two. It's got a better suspension, you know, it's got a little bit more ride height to it, and it feels a bit more refined on road, except for in one key area, and that's the powertrain. The Santa Fe, if you're driving in normal mode, there's a bit of lag to the acceleration, and then when it does come, it happens quite suddenly, so it's a bit hard to actually drive the Santa Fe smoothly at low speeds. The Subaru, you don't really have those problems. This engine, you know, since it doesn't have a turbocharger, just really builds speed kind of naturally, though I would say that the ride quality is a touch below what you're getting in the Hyundai, and the overall sense of refinement a little bit lower as well. But it is worth mentioning that both of these vehicles, when compared to our Bronco on-road, that's where they really strike back. One other way that I would say that both of these vehicles are also superior to our Bronco is when it comes to interior refinement, especially here in the Santa Fe, which in its redesign got a brand spanking new interior that is just spectacular. Now, the XRT is a mid-grade trim of the Santa Fe. You're not going to even see all the really fancy bells and whistles you can get in the Santa Fe in this trim level. For example, in the calligraphy, you get dual wireless charging pads and an auto-dimming rearview mirror and quilted Napa leather, all that stuff. Here in the XRT, it's a bit more basic and quite black on the interior, but still plenty to like. Over here, you have two boxes actually for storage. On the calligraphy, this is actually a UV box that can sanitize objects, but here you can just put smaller objects in here, no problem. The other thing I really like though is this center console. So as you can see, you can open it like normal, but you can also open it from the back here so that people in the back seat have access to your snacks, for better or worse. And this is actually the only vehicle that currently offers a feature like this. Duck down here, because the shifter has been moved up to here on the steering column, it also opens up this rather large storage space down here. So you have a purse or small bag, a great place to keep it so it doesn't slide around. Up here, a 12.3-inch touchscreen, and this is standard on all the Santa Fe's trims. And the good thing about it is it's running the new version of Hyundai's infotainment software. So you're gonna get wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. Now, I mentioned before that the calligraphy, you can get dual wireless charging pads here. That's a great feature to pair with that feature because those things tend to be a drain on your battery, and the wireless charging pad has also been upgraded so it actually charges your phone faster. If there's one thing about this interior that I don't quite like, I don't really know why these climate controls have to be in a touchscreen, and this part actually attracts a lot of fingerprints and gets rather dirty kind of quickly, and especially being out off-road here, you can see the dust has settled kind of all over the interior. We had to wipe it down for this section, but overall, I really love the direction that they've taken with this new Santa Fe interior, and I think it's a huge step up on what it had before, and even better than the Palisade now. I'm just gonna open this up, put these away for a second. All right, now we can talk about the Santa Fe's back seat. So in this redesign, it's also grown. It hasn't really grown in footprint though. The interior has actually gotten bigger. Hyundai tells us that the distance from the dashboard to the tailgate is now akin to what you're going to get in the Palisade. So that means in the second row here, as you can see, I've got plenty of headroom as the vertical sort of styling of the car might suggest, and plenty of legroom. And it's enough that I can actually move up a little bit and still have a lot of legroom, and then I can subject this to the not yet world famous 3 Bryans test. That is where I set the driver's seat where I like to drive, the second row seat here where I'm so comfortable, and then see how I fit in the third row. And the previous Santa Fe did not pass this test, but the new one passes it with flying colors. Back in the third row, I still have plenty of legroom, and the third row even has some desirable amenities. They actually have a fan speed controller and a household outlet back there, giving this vehicle plenty of space and utility across all three rows, something you couldn't say about the last Santa Fe. Now, you may also notice that here in the second row here, you get a bench seat, and that is because with the XRT, you can only get a bench seat. If you want captain's chairs, you have to go up to the calligraphy, and that sort of leads me to a point about the XRT. I sort of wish this wasn't a trim level. I wish it was an options package. I think it'd be pretty cool to be able to get a Santa Fe with all the technology, with all the bells and whistles, and still get the slight extra bit of capability with the XRT package and the added ground clearance, better tires, and black wheels. So Hyundai, if you're listening, please make the XRT options available across the rest of the lineup. And even if you don't listen, this is still great value. In our time with the Santa Fe, I've also come to really appreciate this cargo area. Now, you may notice that these hinges are super long, and that is no accident. It's because Hyundai wanted to prioritize having the widest possible cargo opening that they could on the Santa Fe, and it's great. Any kind of long objects you can fit back here behind the third row even. Just 14.6 cubic feet of cargo room back here, but if you drop this third row, that expands to just over 40 cubic feet, and that's more cargo room than you're going to get even behind the second row of the Bronco, and way more than you're going to get behind the back seat of the Crosstrek, which has just over 20 cubic feet. Now, one thing I do like about that Crosstrek though is that it comes with this rubberized like floor mat that has the Wilderness logo on it, and it looks cool, and it's also very easy to take out and clean. So if you have to store anything dirty in the back of the Crosstrek, you don't have to get the actual carpet itself dirty, and it's just very convenient. Now, if we do drop the second row, which we can do here via these handy switches in the cargo area, this cargo area actually expands to almost 80 cubic feet. So the Santa Fe does a really, really good job of efficiently using its space so you can fit big items in it. It's also impossible to talk about the new Santa Fe without talking about how it looks. Now, this styling might be a little bit polarizing because some people may not want a Hyundai that sort of looks like a baby Land Rover Defender, but I really like it because it's such a departure from all the things that Hyundai has done before, and because it has some really cool little touches like these H's in the headlights and the taillights, and this little cool grab handle back there in the C-pillar so you can easier access things on the roof. I love the boxy styling. I love the way it looks. I even love these 18-inch black wheels you get here on the XRT package. But the Subaru, I think, looks pretty plain Jane in comparison. It's not that I think that the Crosstrek is ugly. I just think it is, how should we say this, not quite as pretty. I do really enjoy these black wheels that you get on the Wilderness models. These copper accents, you can either take them or leave them, but I really don't like that Subaru has fallen in love with cladding. There's just all sorts of plastic stuff around the bottom of the vehicle. It doesn't need to show that it's tough, it just needs to actually be tough. The Subaru's interior in a lot of ways reminds me of the exterior. I wouldn't say there's really a ton wrong with it, but again, people don't buy Subarus for the interiors. They buy them because they want the all-wheel drive or because your resale value is going to be through the roof, but Subaru has never really produced super high quality interiors, and this is good enough. It's good for what the price tag is. I think the materials are okay. I actually think that these front seats are more comfortable than the ones you do get in the Santa Fe, so give the Crosstrek points for that. But what really sort of irks me about this whole thing here is the screen. So it's a vertically oriented screen, not bad in and of itself, but this system, it feels dated, it feels laggy. There are times when it takes a little while to boot up. It's a very sharp contrast from the ultra modern sort of feel of that new Hyundai system, and I don't think that this thing sort of quite lives up to that or to the other modern infotainment systems that you can get. Back seat is big enough for a vehicle of this size. Now remember, this is a lot smaller than the Santa Fe. This is kind of akin to sort of like an old compact hatchback, just a little bit raised up, you know, to give you some off-road capability. And for that, the back seat is actually pretty large, plenty of legroom and headroom for adults that are about 6 feet tall or under. And yeah, I mean, this is a very sort of like the exterior, feels very functional, feels a little rugged, doesn't necessarily feel high quality, but no real qualms about spending time in here. If you want more information about either of these vehicles, the Crosstrek or the Santa Fe, head over to Edmunds.com where you'll find our full rating for each of them, not just the off-road trims, but the entire model lineup. I wouldn't say that out here on the trail we ran into many surprises. The things that we thought that these two might struggle at, they did. They obviously can't climb things the same way that the Bronco can, and their very prominent noses made it difficult to even load them in on obstacles that we wanted to test their flexibility on. But on a trail, both of them proved to be plenty capable. You will have to go slower than you can in the Bronco, where you can just send it, but these two were pretty good on our little fast trail loop. I did like the power output in the Santa Fe more, though the Crosstrek was no slouch and its CVT didn't really prove to hamper the fun that much at all. I will say this, the Santa Fe's longer wheelbase did make it more stable, especially on the hill climb. There was a lot less back and forth than we were getting in the Crosstrek, but the Subaru had a superior traction control system, spun its tires a little bit less, and both of these, I think that if you took the bumpers off and put on a real all-terrain tire, could go even further than we showed today. What stuck out to me today though about these two vehicles is the value that they offer. The Subaru, just around $33,000, while the Santa Fe is just a hair over $42,000. And both are significantly cheaper than our Bronco, which we paid over $60,000 for 3 years ago. As vehicles have gotten more expensive, value becomes harder and harder to find, so it's very cool that these two seem to be well worth their price tags, especially that Santa Fe with this really cool new interior and pretty good looks. So if what you're looking for is maximum capability, be prepared to pay Bronco prices. But if what you're looking for is a sometimes off-roader to get you down a trail or a fire road to a campsite on the weekends, these two soft rotors are definitely worth your consideration and your dollars. And if I had to drive something home on the freeway today, I would rather be in either of these two than the Ford. Thanks for watching.